Hello YouTube, welcome to video number 8 in our introduction to game development using a Python Pygame module library, okay, series. Okay, so in this tutorial we're going to go ahead and learn how to add multiple enemies into our game, because right now we just have a single enemy, and whenever we shoot a bullet at the enemy simply responds in a new location. So how do we make sure that we have multiple enemies? Let's say that we want to keep 5 different alien crafts moving on the screen at the same time. So how do we go ahead and implement such that we have multiple enemies on our screen? And yeah, that's what basically I want to go ahead and implement in this video. So let's get ahead to it. And again, if you're new to the channel, please kindly consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you haven't already subscribed. So this channel is just mostly for Python developers and also programming in general. So if you're a JavaScript developer, building web applications, back-end applications, if you are any developer interested in programming, then please kindly consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. We go over building different projects in this on this channel. Okay, so thanks for subscribing, I assume. Okay, so once we have that, let's go actually jump ahead and go into my VS Code. So I have my VS Code open up, and last time we ended up at creating the ability to shoot down the enemy. So if I go ahead, we can shoot down the the enemy, but the enemy simply responds in a new location, right? The enemy the enemy simply responds to a new location, and we get points count right here. Okay, so what I want to go ahead and do now is to actually make sure that we are able to have multiple enemies instead of just one enemy. So to do this, you can easily guess we're going to be using a for loop to make sure we have multiple enemies. Okay, to do that, I'm just going to go in here and create a for loop, right? So I'm going to say for I in range, and you're going to have a variable called number of enemies, which is going to have the total number of enemies that we want in our game. So I'm going to go down here, up here, and sorry, I'm going to say number underscore of underscore enemies. So number of enemies, you can say, let's say I want 4 enemies at the time on the screen. So I'm going to simply copy this, and simply for I in range a number of enemies, right? You're going to go ahead and have 4 enemies. Okay, so once I have that right there, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and simply say enemy underscore img, right? We're going to now say dot append. So now you're using this append method, and this append method is used on a list. So I'm going to go down up here, simply copy this out. I'm going to copy it and then simply put in a list. So I'm going to convert this into a list instead, and then what we're going to be adding in there, we're going to be adding the asset that I just copied. So I copied the content I copied from here, I pasted it inside of this append method. Mean you're going to add the image, the player image, inside of this list. Okay, you're going to go ahead and repeat that for all the other ones that we have. So I'm going to say enemy x. I'm going to go down here and say enemy enemy x, and this is going to be enemy x is going to say dot append, and then you're going to go append something. So I'm going to go ahead and simply copy this, cut it from right here. I'm going to hit Control and X, and then make this make sure that now it's a list, and I'm going to paste what I have cut from there. And I'm also going to repeat the same thing for y. So I'm going to say enemy y, and this is going to enemy y, sorry, it's going to be dot append, and then simply go ahead and simply copy this from here. So cut it out, so Control X on my keyboard, and then make sure that's a list, and then go ahead and paste the content that you copied right in here. And then also for the change in enemy x, which is right here, we're going to do the same. So I'm going to copy it, cut it from here, make it a list, and I'm going to go down and say change in enemy change underscore in enemy what did I call it? I said change in enemy x position. Change in enemy x position, which is right here, and I'm going to make it dot append, and I'm going to go ahead and append what I have just copied, which is 0.4. So that's basically it, how you're going to have multiple enemies. So now that you have spawned multiple enemies, now we need to go into our while loop, where our game is continuously running, because it's just at the beginning of the game where we spawn all 4 enemies. Okay, so once we have 4 enemies created, now I'm going to go down here, just here. This way we're going to go ahead and display the enemies, set the boundaries, and all of that. Now this is going to be in a for loop, right? So we're going to go ahead and simply put this inside now of a for loop. So I'm going to say for I in range, right? And the range is going to be number of enemies. Okay, and then do this, make sure I put that column there. So I'm going to go ahead and indent all of this. So now this is going to now be changing into a list instead. So I'm going to be using a list operation. So I'm going to change this to be I, change here to be I, and then I'm going to go here and change this to be I, just add I there, because right now it's a list. So I'm going to go ahead and say I as well, and here we're going to go ahead and say I, and then here we're also going to go ahead and say index I. Okay, so that's basically what you're going we need to do right there. So yes, that's basically what we need to do. Okay, so once we have that, yeah, that's all. And I can also say enemy change in position. Let me see, enemy change in enemy I. Let me see what else we need to do here. Changing let me just actually run the game to see if everything let me just read the code one more time to make sure that everything works before we move on. Okay, so changing enemy X position, which is this enemy right here, we're going to say enemy movements. So now we're not getting enemy, you're getting enemy of I. So I'm going to simply go ahead and simply copy all of this. So I'm just going to cut it and simply move it inside of this follow. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do. So because now we don't have enemy X anymore, we have the enemy X list, which you're going to access the I index and then simply do this right here. And now any position, you're going to also go ahead and access the I index. Okay, because now this is a list. So that's basically what we need to implement right there. So that's what I was looking for. And yeah, so now we're going to be dealing with the list instead of rather than the enemy object, right? Or the enemy object itself. Right now we're going to be dealing with a list instead. So now once we have that, let me just go ahead and simply run this again. So we have an error right here. So let me just see, it says that if collision detection this, okay, let me just see, maybe we need to change our code somewhere else. Okay, so we need to actually go ahead and change our code here. So this is going to go ahead and we also need to go ahead and indent this as well. So I need to go ahead and simply indent this as well. And now this is going to be changing into enemy I, because it's a list, right, and not the enemy object itself. So I'm going to say I right there. Yeah, that's basically what we need to do. And let me see if I got everything right. So we increment this, and also for the enemy part here, I also need to go ahead and get this right here. So I'm going to go and cut this off, and I'm going to go in here and simply paste it right here, and then make sure that I have that tab there. And now this is going to be the enemy I, and then so here is going to be the enemy I index. Okay, so let me just see. Yeah, that's basically what we need to do right there. We have only one player, so this one can remain, right? So that's basically what we need to do right there. So make sure that this is outside of this if statement and is on the main line with if, the same indentation as the if statement above here. Okay, so that's basically what we need to do. And let me just fix this. Yeah, that's what we need to do, and hopefully we don't have any more errors. So we have another more error. It says that argument 1 must be a numpy surface, not a list. Okay, so the reason why we are getting this error is because we are still using the enemy list right here. So you're not supposed to pass in a list. You're supposed to pass in a pygame.surface and not a list. So let's go ahead and actually fix that. That's actually a simple error to fix. So let's go up here. So the error is probably up here. We are trying to bleed the enemy onto the screen. So we have to say enemy image and then simply get of index I. Okay, of index I, which you want. So let me just see if you're supposed to say index I right there. So you're supposed to say index I of that enemy. Okay, so that's basically it for this to work. Yeah, so that's basically it, but we never passed in I, right? So this will give us an error. So let's go actually pass in I, and then let's go and look for where you're calling this function. So I just highlighted it, and let me just go where I'm looking for this function, which is right here. So I need to go ahead and pass in I here as well. Okay, so that's basically what I need to do right there. So once I have this done, now this should be able to work. Let's go ahead and check it out if it's going to work without getting any errors. So we go here we go. So we have 4 enemies. So if I shoot down the enemy, so now it gets you get an error. So int object is not subscriptable. Int object is not subscriptable. So we probably did an error somewhere on enemy, and then I and then I. So we probably have an error right there, and it says that int object is not subscriptable. So let's go ahead and actually figure out why it's telling us that int object is not subscriptable. So here, let me try to look at it from this point. So we're going to say enemy image. You're getting enemy image 1, and then in here I'm going to pass in the x and the y, and enemy x and the enemy y, and enemy x and enemy y are the different values that we pass in here. So if I scroll down here, these are the enemy x and the enemy y that we passed in, and then we pass in I. So let me just go and see if I have I passed in there. I have I passed in here. So what's the cause of this error? So let's go ahead and see what's the cause of this error. It says that int object is not subscriptable, and this error is occurring on this line. We are saying the enemy x and you're getting the height index, and also the enemy y the height index, and that seems to be giving us an error. So let's go ahead and see what the error is. So I'm just going to scroll down here and try to figure out what the error is right here. Yeah, and the error is right here. I figure out also this is going to be I. We have to say also here I, and also here I, because that's now an index, right? So yeah, that's basically, that's why we're getting that error, because we are trying to respawn the enemy, but we don't know, we're using the enemy list object instead of the enemy itself, like enemy object, not the enemy list object. So that's why we are getting that error. So once I have this there, I'm just going to clear this and simply run the code again, and let me just go ahead and try to shoot. Okay, now we don't have that. So you can see now whenever we shoot an enemy, it responds in a different area, and now we have at any time of the game, you have only 4 enemies on the screen. So that's basically it. Yeah, and then we can get our points there, so our points are increasing, and whenever we shoot an enemy, the enemy responds in a new location. So that's basically it. So yeah, that's basically it, and everything was works as expected this time. So yeah, so that's all I wanted us to cover in this tutorial. So now what's left now is to be able to add a bit of sound to our game and all of that. So we'll learn how to add a bit of sound, and also how to do an end screen to maybe you can keep a score to display the enemy score right here and all of that. So we're going to cover that in the next tutorial. So if you guys are new to the channel, please kindly consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, liking this video, and sharing this content with anyone who you think might find it helpful. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Keep safe.